Hello, friends, it's me, KITT. When I'm not out fighting crime, I like to follow my friends at KnightRiderHistorians.com. Check it out.
Welcome to another episode of the Night Vault, a series where we delve into some of the screen-used Knight Rider props that we've accumulated, as well as cast and crew gifts, merchandise, and different things like that. So, today we have a very interesting piece. This is an original Season 2 pod unit from KITT's Dash. So this pod unit was never used on screen. It actually came from one of the Universal Studios licensed tour cars. It was this pod. The story goes was put into service in 1983, and it was used for a couple years. But the problem was with all the people getting in and out of the car whenever it was on tour, they would always bang their knees on these pods, and you know they would crack and whatnot. And in the case of this pod, this whole arm at one point cracked off. So the people in charge of the tour cars removed this pod and replaced it with another one. So in the intervening years, someone had repaired the one arm, so it's back in place. But that's kind of the story of this piece. So it came from an original Universal Studios mold, and it was made in 1983. Only in service a couple years, and then it was physically cut right here with a saw. It was cut off the dash because this was molded as one piece in with the dash in the car, but it was cut off, and then a new one was grafted onto that dash, and then it continued to tour. So let's take a closer look at this. Most of what you'll be really interested to see, I'm sure, these original pod buttons. So let's kind of take a closer look at those. So these are the only known example of original season 1-2 buttons in existence. You know, the ones that you see on the stage or the insert dash whenever you're watching the show and they show the close-ups of the dash, those are kind of missing in action. The dash that was in the original Hero car for the first 2 seasons, that we believe has been destroyed. So these represent possibly the only original Knight Rider buttons for the season 1-2 left. So we'll take a closer look at them. Now this X-ray button, as you can see, is peeling off. I need to re-adhere it. But you know, you take a side profile of it, you kind of get to see how these buttons were made. They're individual buttons that were all glued together. If you were to take this panel off, which I'm not going to do because it's adhered, but if you take it off, you can see the contact points for each button behind it. And you can see still has the original stickers with the functions written on them. Some of them, of course, are you know, not accurate to the show. Some of these skip STA2. And this was a tour car, so it didn't necessarily have to abide by what you'd see on screen. And you could see high traction drop downs, they put the T and the H in the wrong place. But you know, X-ray looks screen accurate. This 7DLA does. And that's about it. So this pod, these buttons were never meant to, or for the car this was in, these were never meant to light up or do anything. So the buttons are all glued down. You can't press them. Nothing happens. The caps are just glued on. These LEDs are not wired to anything. The buttons are not wired to anything. This is a complete panel that just pulls off and comes back on. Okay, so moving on. So we can see there's some old paint bubbling there, but one of the ways to tell that it's an original pod, and I think some of the replica manufacturers have started copying this, but you can see an indent right here. There's a circular indent around the side. And that's just part of the original mold that kind of helps you tell that that's original. So if we go over to this side, you get a better picture of what a season 2 pod looked like without the cutouts, without the buttons on it. So this is all molded. This is all fiberglass that's molded in to the pod itself. So let's take this and let's turn it around. Kind of take a look at the back here. So what we have here on this particular pod, the back of this was all filled in with body filler. You can see it's all chipping away here. But because this was used on tour, one of the things that they did was to help strengthen it as much as they could. They filled this there's a cavity back here, and they filled it with resin. So this is all solid. It's very, very solid, not hollow at all. And that was to help, supposedly, to protect it from people breaking it off when they got in and out of the car. However, it didn't really work. It ended up breaking, right in here, right where the solid part ends and the hollow part begins. But there, you can kind of get a better picture. This one is solid further back in, but there's quite a bit of a cavity there. And that's all fiberglassed in. This part right here, this is where I was telling you that they took a saw and cut it off. This was rougher. I mean, you could see the saw marks in here. It was very rough, and it was refinished at one point to kind of give it a smooth backing. So you can't see the cuts anymore, but we have pictures of what this looked like before this was smoothed over, and you can clearly see how this was hacked off with a saw. But other than that, it's a standard, standard pod. There's kind of your top view of it. There, it kind of gives you an idea. You can see the thickness of the bump out there, and how the back of it kind of curves back. And then if we come over to here, you can see right there, same thing. There's the buttons that are glued on top. So there you have it, a season 2, not screen used, but certainly Universal Studios original season 1-2 pod unit. So if you have any questions, comments, please feel free to leave them below. If you have any topics for future shows you'd like us to do, you want to know, you want us to do an episode on what happened to the semi, or how many Knight Rider cars were used, or filming locations, or whatever, leave them in the comments. We'd like to see what we can do there. So be sure to also visit our Facebook page at Knight Rider Historians, and our website, www.knightriderhistorians.com. All right, thanks. We'll see you next time. Bye.